In the world of courtroom drama, moments of seriousness often take center stage, but every now and then an unexpected twist of humor changes the atmosphere entirely. Such was the case when Crockett's astonishing $12 million claim was presented before Judge Mathis, a moment that quickly turned from tense to unforgettable. What began as a straightforward case suddenly transformed into an exchange that had the judge, the audience, and even observers bursting into laughter. This case didn't just highlight the audacity of the claim, it revealed how humor, reality, and exaggeration can collide in a courtroom setting, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. When Crockett walked into the courtroom with a demand of $12 million, it was not just another case on the docket, it was a statement that immediately caught attention and raised eyebrows. The audacity of asking for such a massive sum in front of Judge Mathis made the entire proceeding unusual from the very beginning. Most people who come before a judge typically seek reasonable compensation or justice that aligns with the scale of the issue they are dealing with, but Crockett's figure of $12 million placed the case in a category that bordered on unbelievable. This sheer exaggeration served as the first spark of drama and comedy, because it quickly became clear that this claim was not grounded in proportionality but in a kind of bold imagination that seemed designed to shock or provoke a reaction. The courtroom audience could sense that what was about to unfold would not be an ordinary dispute, but rather a spectacle where exaggeration clashed with reality. The psychology of such an exaggerated demand is interesting to unpack. On one hand, it might reflect desperation or the belief that going big is the only way to be taken seriously. On the other hand, it might simply reveal a lack of awareness of how the legal system works and what judges actually consider fair or realistic. Crockett's choice to present a $12 million claim demonstrates a mindset where the stakes are elevated to an almost fantastical level, and that is why the case became more than a legal proceeding, it became a performance. The boldness of the claim didn't just capture Judge Mathis's attention, it captured the attention of everyone listening, because people are naturally fascinated by extreme statements, whether they are achievable or not. This human tendency to be drawn to exaggeration explains why the case was so memorable and why laughter became part of the response. The audacity also reflected how some individuals perceive the courtroom as a stage where anything can be said, where numbers can be inflated without boundaries, and where personal conviction can overshadow common sense. Crockett's $12 million demand might have been rooted in a sense of self-importance or an attempt to maximize the situation, but in reality, it created the opposite effect. Instead of being taken as a serious claim that warranted deep legal examination, it became a source of humor, disbelief, and even ridicule. Judge Mathis, known for his wit and sharp tongue, quickly recognized the absurdity of the demand and responded in a way that mirrored what the audience was thinking. This reaction is what ultimately made the moment unforgettable, because it reminded everyone that even in a space dedicated to justice, exaggeration that crosses into the realm of the ridiculous cannot be sustained without being challenged. Crockett's exaggerated demand also sheds light on how people sometimes confuse justice with personal gain. A case is meant to balance fairness, to provide a resolution that acknowledges harm and compensates proportionally, but when someone inflates the claim beyond reason, the focus shifts from justice to greed. This is what makes the case a lesson in itself, because it forces us to question how far individuals will go in seeking outcomes that are not only unrealistic but also detached from the principles of fairness. The $12 million claim stands as an example of how exaggeration can undermine credibility. Instead of strengthening Crockett's position, it weakened it, because it suggested a lack of seriousness or an attempt to exploit the system for personal advantage. The courtroom thrives on credibility, evidence, and the alignment of claims with facts. When Crockett brought forth his demand, it was as though he ignored these pillars entirely, leaning instead on the shock value of a number so large it couldn't be ignored. Yet, in trying to capture attention, what he ultimately secured was laughter. Judge Mathis's ability to cut through the exaggeration with humor highlighted how absurd claims often collapse under their own weight. The courtroom became a mirror reflecting the disparity between Crockett's belief in the legitimacy of his demand and the actual standards of justice. This disparity is what turned the situation into a comedic episode rather than a legal triumph. The exaggeration also illustrates a common theme in human behavior. When individuals feel wronged or disrespected, they sometimes overcompensate by demanding more than is reasonable. Crockett's $12 million figure may have been his way of expressing the depth of his frustration or the scale of his perceived injustice. But the problem with this approach is that exaggeration rarely communicates seriousness; instead, it signals desperation or detachment from reality. In this case, what could have been handled as a normal dispute ballooned into a scenario where the central focus became the ridiculousness of the number rather than the substance of the complaint. This shift in focus robbed Crockett of the chance to argue effectively, because the sheer size of the claim overshadowed whatever grievances he may have had. In courtroom dynamics, exaggeration also interacts with authority in powerful ways. Judges are not just neutral arbiters, they are figures who embody the principles of rationality, fairness, and proportionality. When someone like Crockett introduces a claim that violates these principles by stretching them to the point of absurdity, the judge's authority is reinforced by contrast. Judge Mathis's reaction demonstrated this perfectly. By laughing and responding with wit, he reminded everyone in the room that the law is built on reason, not on wild demands. This moment reinforced the judge's role as someone who not only interprets law but also protects the courtroom from becoming a stage for theatrics. Crockett's audacity provided an opportunity for Judge Mathis to showcase his authority in a way that connected with both logic and humor. At a deeper level, the exaggeration of $12 million is also symbolic of how society views money as the ultimate measure of value. Crockett may have believed that by attaching a massive figure to his claim, he was signaling the seriousness of his situation or the depth of his suffering. However, the courtroom exposed the flaw in that reasoning, because value in legal contexts is not determined by ambition but by evidence, precedent, and proportionality. The exaggerated demand therefore highlighted a clash between personal perception and institutional standards. This clash is what created the humor, because the number was so disproportionate to the context that it became impossible to treat it with straight-faced seriousness. The audacity of Crockett's claim is memorable because it embodies a tension we often see in everyday life between what people want and what is actually reasonable. In demanding $12 million, Crockett placed himself in the realm of the extraordinary, but he also placed himself outside the realm of believability. This balancing act between ambition and absurdity is why his case continues to be talked about, because it illustrates in vivid detail how exaggeration can capture attention but fail to achieve credibility. Judge Mathis's laughter was not just entertainment, it was a reflection of a deeper truth about the limits of exaggeration in a system that depends on fairness and reason. Judge Mathis is widely recognized not just for his legal expertise but also for his sharp wit and ability to cut through nonsense with humor that resonates deeply with both the courtroom and the audience watching from afar. When Crockett presented his staggering $12 million claim, it wasn't only the boldness of the number that stood out, it was how Judge Mathis chose to respond that transformed the situation into a moment of memorable comedy. His laughter was not forced, nor was it disrespectful. It was a natural, human reaction to something so exaggerated that it defied seriousness. That laughter instantly shifted the mood of the courtroom, diffusing tension and showing that even in a place where justice is taken with the utmost seriousness, there is still space for humor to reveal truth. Judge Mathis's humorous reaction was a perfect example of how authority and comedy can intersect to highlight absurdity without losing control of the proceedings. The courtroom is traditionally a place of formality, order, and respect. Judges maintain strict authority, and those who appear before them are expected to present their cases with honesty and sincerity. But when Crockett's $12 million demand was announced, it shattered the expectation of seriousness and replaced it with a scene that begged for a different kind of response. Judge Mathis, with years of experience dealing with both legitimate cases and outrageous claims, recognized immediately that this was not a moment for stern lecturing or drawn-out legal explanation. Instead, he used humor as a tool to underscore the ridiculousness of the claim. His laughter was not merely amusement, it was a form of judgment in itself, showing that the case had crossed into territory where rational consideration could not even begin without acknowledging the absurdity first. The way Judge Mathis blends humor with authority is what makes him so unique. He doesn't laugh simply to entertain, he laughs to expose. When someone brings forward a claim that stretches logic beyond belief, his laughter shines a spotlight on that illogic. In Crockett's case, the $12 million figure was so out of proportion to the situation that ignoring the exaggeration would have diminished the credibility of the court. By laughing, Judge Mathis reminded everyone that justice does not entertain delusion, but it can acknowledge it with humor that both teaches and entertains. This ability to weave humor into moments of exaggeration keeps the courtroom authentic and relatable, because the audience outside of the case feels validated in their own reaction of disbelief. Judge Mathis's humor also plays an important role in connecting with the people who watch his courtroom show. For many viewers, courtrooms may feel intimidating, filled with jargon and formalities that create distance. But when Judge Mathis bursts into laughter at an outrageous claim, he bridges that gap. He becomes not just a figure of authority but also a voice of common sense, reacting the way an average person would. In Crockett's case, when he demanded $12 million, viewers could relate instantly to the absurdity, and Judge Mathis's humor gave them permission to laugh along. This kind of reaction strengthens the bond between the judge and his audience, because he reflects their own thoughts in real time, validating their sense of reason. The humor, however, is not without purpose. Behind the laughter, Judge Mathis delivers sharp commentary. When he responds to exaggerated claims, he uses his wit to remind litigants that the courtroom is not a place for fantasies but for truth and accountability. Crockett may have believed that throwing out a huge number would intimidate or impress, but Judge Mathis's reaction dismantled that illusion. His laughter stripped the claim of its intended seriousness, turning it instead into a cautionary tale about credibility. The more Crockett insisted, the more it became evident that the claim was rooted in exaggeration rather than evidence. Judge Mathis's humor became a mirror, reflecting the absurdity back at Crockett in a way that no legal jargon ever could. Another layer of Judge Mathis's humor is how it preserves dignity while deflating nonsense. Laughter can be a sharp weapon, but in his courtroom it is wielded with balance. He does not ridicule individuals simply for being present, he ridicules the ideas or claims that defy common sense. Crockett's $12 million demand fell squarely into that category, and so Judge Mathis's laughter served as both a rebuke and a lesson. It taught Crockett, and everyone watching, that exaggeration without grounding in reality will always collapse under scrutiny. Humor softened what could have been a harsh dismissal, yet the message was still unmistakably clear: the courtroom requires reason, not theatrics. The broader implication of Judge Mathis's humorous reaction is that it demonstrates how justice can be human without being diminished. Judges are often seen as distant, authoritative figures who rule from a position of solemn detachment. But Mathis has built his reputation on being approachable, relatable, and capable of expressing genuine human reactions. His laughter at Crockett's claim didn't undermine the seriousness of the court, it enhanced it by showing that absurdity has no place in reasoned deliberation. This balance between humanity and authority makes his judgments more impactful, because they are grounded not only in law but also in lived experience and common sense. For the litigants, however, Judge Mathis's humor can be a double-edged sword. On one side, it softens the blow of rejection by framing it with laughter, but on the other, it makes clear that their claim is not just being denied but being exposed as unworthy of serious consideration. Crockett's $12 million demand became a punchline not because the court was cruel, but because the claim itself lacked credibility. The laughter emphasized that the case was not only weak but also entertaining in its exaggeration, a situation that few litigants would want to be remembered for. Yet this is precisely why Judge Mathis's humor is so effective. It ensures that moments of absurdity do not pass unnoticed, but instead become lessons etched into memory. The reaction also sheds light on the dynamic between judge and litigant. In most cases, the litigant controls the narrative until the judge intervenes with a ruling. But in Crockett's case, the narrative was hijacked by Judge Mathis's laughter. This shift in control turned the spotlight away from Crockett's demand and placed it firmly on the judge's reaction. In doing so, Mathis reminded everyone in the room that authority in the courtroom does not belong to exaggeration but to reason and truth. His humor became a form of control, disarming the litigant's attempt to inflate the situation and restoring balance to the proceedings. The humor also had a communal effect. Courtrooms are filled with people who come not just to argue cases but also to observe. When Judge Mathis laughed, the audience felt free to laugh as well, creating a shared moment that underscored the ridiculousness of the claim. This collective reaction further diminished the weight of Crockett's demand, as it was no longer a solitary exaggeration but a spectacle that everyone could see for what it was. The laughter unified the room in a way that formal rulings cannot, because it appealed to shared human understanding. In the end, Judge Mathis's humorous reaction to Crockett's $12 million claim serves as a reminder that authority does not have to be cold or detached to be effective. Humor, when used wisely, reinforces credibility, exposes absurdity, and creates a lasting impression that transcends the specifics of the case. Judge Mathis's laughter wasn't just about entertainment, it was a strategic, human response that dismantled exaggeration, preserved the integrity of the courtroom, and left a moment that people would continue to discuss long after the case had ended. The broader message that emerges from Crockett's $12 million case and Judge Mathis's reaction is one that goes beyond humor or entertainment and touches on themes of truth, accountability, and the way courtroom drama reflects larger societal issues. At its core, the situation illustrates how exaggeration and unrealistic demands can undermine credibility and how truth is ultimately what sustains justice. Crockett's claim was not simply about a number, it was about the perception that inflating the value of a grievance could yield greater results. This mindset is not unique to him, it represents a wider human tendency to stretch facts when seeking advantage, whether in legal matters, personal disputes, or everyday negotiations. But in the courtroom, where accountability is central, this kind of behavior is quickly exposed. The contrast between Crockett's claim and Judge Mathis's reaction became a symbolic lesson in why truth must remain the foundation of any fair proceeding. Accountability in this case did not come only from legal scrutiny but also from public exposure. By bringing such an exaggerated claim before a judge who is known for sharp honesty and humor, Crockett placed himself in a position where accountability was unavoidable. Judge Mathis's laughter was more than a reaction, it was a form of accountability in itself, showing that outrageous behavior would not be allowed to pass unchecked. This highlights a powerful message about how authority must balance fairness with firmness, making sure that those who attempt to abuse the system are called out, not coddled. In everyday life, this message applies as well. When people attempt to take advantage through exaggeration, society benefits when those attempts are challenged rather than ignored. Courtroom drama has always fascinated people because it is more than legal proceedings, it is a stage where truth and lies, seriousness and absurdity, credibility and exaggeration all collide. Crockett's $12 million case is a perfect example of how drama plays out in real time, capturing the imagination of those watching while also reinforcing lessons about justice. The drama was heightened not by the strength of Crockett's argument but by its weakness, and it was Judge Mathis's sharp reaction that turned that weakness into something meaningful. Through laughter, the courtroom became more than a place of judgment, it became a stage where truth was elevated above exaggeration. This kind of drama is what resonates with audiences, because it mirrors the everyday conflicts we all witness in life, conflicts where people sometimes go too far in trying to prove their point, only to be pulled back by reality. The role of truth in this context cannot be overstated. Truth is not just about honesty and testimony, it is about aligning claims with reality in a way that makes sense. Crockett's failure was not simply that he asked for money but that he asked for an amount so wildly disproportionate to the context that it destroyed the credibility of his entire position. Judge Mathis's reaction drove home the point that truth is always stronger than exaggeration, because truth stands on its own, while exaggeration crumbles when examined. This is a universal principle that extends far beyond the courtroom, reminding us that in relationships, work, and society, exaggeration may grab attention, but it rarely produces trust or long-term results. Accountability also came in the form of public perception. When people witnessed the case, they didn't just laugh at the absurdity, they also understood the lesson embedded in it. The courtroom, often seen as distant and intimidating, suddenly became a relatable place where common sense prevailed. Crockett's exaggeration and Mathis's response demonstrated accountability in a way that was accessible to all. People could see themselves in the situation, perhaps recalling times when they exaggerated or encountered others who did, and they could appreciate the importance of being held accountable to reality. The message is that without accountability, justice loses its foundation, because unchecked exaggeration or dishonesty would overwhelm truth. The courtroom drama also underscores how authority can be both firm and approachable. Judge Mathis did not need to deliver a long lecture about honesty, his laughter said it all. This shows that accountability does not always require formal punishment. Sometimes, being publicly exposed, laughed at, or corrected in front of others is accountability enough to remind people of the importance of truth. Crockett's case became memorable not because of a legal outcome but because of the way drama was infused with a clear message about the value of credibility. The stage of the courtroom amplified this message, making it resonate with audiences far beyond the immediate participants. The broader message also extends into the societal obsession with money and the idea that financial value is the ultimate measure of justice. Crockett may have believed that by attaching a massive dollar amount to his claim, he was emphasizing the seriousness of his case. But Judge Mathis's reaction revealed how flawed that logic was. Money does not define truth, and justice is not about inflating numbers but about aligning outcomes with fairness. This lesson is critical in a world where financial gain is often pursued at the expense of integrity. The courtroom became a microcosm of this larger societal struggle, showing that when truth is sacrificed for greed, the result is not respect but ridicule. The drama of the case also shows how exaggeration can backfire in spectacular ways. Instead of amplifying the legitimacy of Crockett's complaint, the $12 million figure destroyed it. This is an important reminder that when people overstate their case, they often weaken their own credibility. Accountability ensures that these exaggerations are exposed, and drama makes the exposure unforgettable. Judge Mathis's laughter will be remembered long after the specific details of the case are forgotten, because it symbolized the collapse of exaggeration under the weight of truth. There is also an important cultural element to the broader message. People are drawn to courtroom shows because they provide entertainment, but they also provide moral lessons in digestible, dramatic form. Crockett's case reinforced a timeless message: truth matters, exaggeration fails, and accountability cannot be avoided. This is why audiences connected so strongly to the moment, because it provided not just laughter but also a reaffirmation of values that matter in everyday life. When people saw Judge Mathis laughing at the claim, they weren't just entertained, they were reminded of the importance of honesty and the futility of stretching facts beyond reason. Ultimately, the broader message of this case lies in the way it combined humor, drama, and authority to reinforce timeless values. Truth will always outweigh exaggeration, accountability will always expose dishonesty, and courtroom drama will always captivate when it reflects these principles in action. Crockett's $12 million claim may have failed as a legal argument, but as a moment of cultural significance, it succeeded in highlighting what happens when exaggeration collides with truth in a space dedicated to justice. Judge Mathis's laughter became the punctuation mark to that lesson, ensuring that it would not only be remembered but also repeated as a story that carries meaning for anyone who encounters it.